Leadership isn't just strategy and vision, it's a nonstop juggling act of decisions, approvals, escalations, and emotional CPR. While everyone else is focused on their own deliverables, leaders are quietly doing 8 types of things that keep the whole machine running, from deciding what matters to protecting the teams from chaos. This video breaks down the real work leaders do every week. No fluff, no buzzwords, just the truth behind the title. Let's jump into the 8 types of things that leaders do. So again, it's a real look at what leadership requires. It's beyond strategy. It's guiding people, decisions, direction, and diplomacy. It's the work that keeps teams moving. It's part vision, part chaos control. And these are the 8 actions that define the craft. If you want to be a leader, these are the things you're going to have to do. Because leaders shape direction and remove obstacles. They make decisions that others can't or won't. It's a balance of people and priorities and pressure. Leadership is about people management, the translation of strategy into action. And it's the same kinds of things that leaders do every week. So I organize them into 8 categories. Let's see what they are. The first is they envision stuff. The second is they direct stuff. Then they inspire stuff. They decide stuff. They read stuff. There's a lot of reading. They approve stuff. They resolve stuff, and then ultimately they protect stuff. So I believe that most leadership activities can be organized into at least one of these 8 categories. Let's dive into each of them and talk about them. So the first is envisioning. That's painting the bigger picture and rallying people around a future that doesn't yet exist. I started with this because I think this is the starting point. It's defining a future state. It's having a vision and a long-term direction that's compelling, that understands the opportunities and threats to that vision so that you can inspire people towards that shared goal and what are the outcomes. And the way that leaders do this is by understanding market signals and scanning the environment for trends. Good leaders ask questions. You can always tell a good leader based on the kinds of questions that they ask. It's challenging assumptions, but then it's painting that picture that people can understand and rally behind, breaking down that vision into something more tangible and actionable, but recognizing that directions will shift and reality will shift, and you need to adjust accordingly. So that's envisioning stuff. The second is they direct stuff. So now that you have the vision, you need to set the priorities, steer everyone in that direction, working together. And so that's priorities and expectations, it's guidance and direction, clarification of who's doing what in roles and responsibilities, and making sure that the team is aligned to the strategy, that you're focusing on what matters, that you're working on things that are moving us forward towards that vision, and again, course correcting when needed. And how does leaders do this? Well, it's communicating clearly, it's reinforcing the direction repeatedly. You got to repeat yourself constantly so that everybody's reminded of where you're going. Redirecting is going to happen, especially if teams get off course. You want to bring them back. It's really important to provide context and not just telling somebody to do it, but understanding why and balancing that autonomy with oversight. And again, it keeps everybody rowing together. So once they envision stuff and they direct stuff, then they got to inspire stuff. It's keeping people motivated and focused, even when the work gets hard, because most visions take years to accomplish. And so you got to make sure that people are motivated across the way. And you do that by building confidence and trust, reinforcing things like purpose and values, making sure you're celebrating wins along the way. But when there's challenges, that you support people and you want to create a culture that people want to be a part of. So you inspire people by leading by example and being genuine and authentic. Stories is a great way of inspiring people and letting them know what you're trying to work towards, recognizing contributions and staying calm under pressure, and being genuine again, showing genuine care for people, I think is one of the most important traits that a leader possesses. So then there's decisions. And every day there's big decisions and little decisions, and it's making the tough calls. Even if the team is stuck, even if the options suck, it's making that decision, the choices that move the organization forward. And the way you do that is by prioritizing what matters the most. And you're going to get as much information as you can, but you got to choose between the options, and they may not be great, but there may be one that's better than another. You want to set expectations and provide clarity, and then you want to own the consequences consequences of those decisions. Everyone's worked for teams where decisions weren't made and work just comes to a halt. And so you really got to make sure that you're moving things forward. And that includes gathering input, and you're not going to have everything and it's not going to be perfect, but you got to do it based on the best information that you have and balancing that data with intuition. This is where experience comes in. You're going to likely be making decisions under pressure, and there's key things that need to happen, but you got to do it to move things forward. And that requires sometimes navigating politics and trade offs. And you don't want to relitigate them all the time, but you may have to revisit them if there's new information and you want to, again, explain to the team why that's a decision. So leaders do a lot of reading. There's decks, there's presentations, there's dashboards, there's so much podcasts, right? So many things, and leaders have to read all of that and consume all of that so that they have an understanding, that they have a pulse of the organization. They can recognize patterns and red flags. They can recognize market trends, and all those things help them make better decisions. And it's about absorbing that content quickly and sort of separating what's important in terms of maybe market signals from what could just be noise. And the way that they do that is, and this depends on style, but some people skim for insights, not reading every detail. AI is now a great way of summarizing information and pulling out the most important points. Again, I talked about asking great questions. Leaders do that. Maybe there's gaps or inconsistencies that they can ask about. But ultimately, you want to turn this information into action and share those insights with your team. So leaders spend a lot of time reading. And if you see really good senior leaders, you could tell that they read the paper, they read podcasts. They're always sort of informed on what's going on. Then there's, I talked about decisions, but there's also approvals. That's giving the green light on things like plans and budgets. And so, I talked about progress stalling. Leaders approve stuff to make sure that things can move forward. So whether that's approving dollars, whether that's approving scope, whether it's approving sort of a new solution, ideally those things align with the strategy. There's going to be risks to those things, but it really does enable the teams to move forward. And leaders review information. They ask tough questions. I think the delegation is important as well. You got to empower and delegate, because you also don't want to be a single point of failure of things piling up. And that's where you balance the speed with the quality. And again, this is about keeping the organization moving. So the seventh thing that leaders do, they resolve stuff. There's always going to be conflicts, whether internal or external, or with vendors or with competitors, and leaders resolve them. They step in when things break or they stall, and they get the team moving. So they step in, whether it's an issue, maybe it's removing blockers. Organizations always have competing priorities, so you need to sort of move things forward. Maybe it's conflicts between team members or even performance issues, and that they're going to make those tough calls because you want to restore momentum. You got to keep the work moving. And the way leaders do this, well, they listen, they understand root causes of some of these, and they try to make decisions that balance the fairness. And you want to communicate the resolutions clearly so people understand what is the resolution and the reasoning behind it. Maybe there's even following up, and you really want to make sure that they prevent from resurfacing so that there's not the same issue over and over again. And finally, leaders protect stuff. They shield the team from chaos and politics and distractions so that the team stays focused on delivering. There's so much unnecessary noise that happens in organizations, and there's so many different requests that if leaders aren't protecting the team just gets distracted and they lose focus on what they're working on. And so it really is about protecting the team, creating that space for them to focus, and getting rid of the noise and all the chaos. And the way they do that is good leaders push back on unrealistic demands. They don't just say it because somebody asked for it. Maybe they absorb some of the stress instead of passing it down, clarifying and understanding, removing those distractions, fighting for bandwidth so that the team stays focused on what they need to, and keeping a good, healthy, and trusting environment. So, look, if I bring it all together, leaders do all of these things. They decide stuff, they envision stuff, they read stuff, direct stuff, approve stuff, resolve stuff, uh, inspire, right? There's a whole bunch of things that leaders do, and they do it every single day and every single week. And you can see it's sort of a mix of strategy, team management, and empathy and motivation, as well as moving things forward. And it's essential because great leaders just make things seem simple, and they're genuine, and they make people want to follow them. Because if you have a high performing team, I promise you there's a leader that's doing all of these things. And look, leadership isn't glamorous. A lot of people want to be leaders because they want to tell people what they do or they want the title or the big check. But it really is about making the hard calls, supporting people, balancing the vision with reality, and it's doing all the stuff that keeps everything moving. And when done well, you know it. You're on a high performing team. It just transforms teams and outcomes, and everybody's is happy and moving forward and productive. Let me know what you think if there's other buckets of categories that I missed. But here's my view on the 8 types of things that leaders do.